When David and I retired, our own children seemed to forget about us. Painful as it is to admit, that's the reality. All our lives, David and I struggled tirelessly for the sake of our 3 children, but now they have no time for us. I got married at 18. My classmate became my husband. We had been friends since childhood. 6 months later, I found out I was pregnant. Despite our financial struggles, we made the decision to have the baby. 8 months later, a baby girl was born, and David gave her an angelic name, Emily. She truly looked like a little angel. Blonde hair and blue eyes. She's such a darling, as if she came straight from heaven. I would say to my family and friends, smiling. Our daughter was a calm child by nature, and I thanked God for such a gift. David had to drop out of school and get a job. Meanwhile, I took a leave of absence and stayed home with the baby. At that time, I was also juggling taking care of our daughter and studying. "Don't worry, Sarah, everything will work out," David would reassure me. "We'll get through these tough times. They're temporary." Things started to improve, but then we found out I was pregnant again. After a family meeting, David said we would keep this baby too. We had to push ourselves even harder. "We need to get our act together," he would say, trying to reassure me. "We'll figure it out somehow." My beloved worked day and night at 2 or 3 jobs, and I hardly saw him at home. We lived in a modest apartment that we rented for a small fee. Money was still tight, especially with the arrival of our second child. "We're able to overcome all difficulties because we're together," David would say with a smile. "Together, we're overcoming life's challenges." I graduated with great difficulty, balancing caring for 2 young children, managing household chores, and studying. But despite everything, we managed. When Emily started school and Lily went to daycare, I finally managed to find a job in my field and help David. Our financial situation stabilized, especially after we bought a larger apartment on credit. Things were looking up, and we could afford to spend every summer vacationing by the seaside. When I turned 30, fate gave us another gift, a 3rd pregnancy. I still don't understand how we managed everything back then. I found myself at home again, buried in chores. A large family isn't just one child and a husband. David did his best to provide for us, working day and night. If he managed to get 5 hours of sleep a day, it was a luxury. The children were gradually growing up. Lily started 1st grade when Emily was in her senior year. Money was always tight, but David and I somehow made it work. We borrowed from friends, took out loans, or found odd jobs. We thought about the kids and their future every minute, wanting them to have a much better life than ours and to never be in need of money. By the time Emily was in her 3rd year of college, she announced she was getting married. David and I almost turned gray, but there was nowhere to run. Her chosen one was a decent guy from a respectable family, so we blessed her marriage. Of course, we had to spend a lot on the wedding and everything else. We later helped our daughter and son-in-law buy a house. We understood better than anyone that without personal housing, a normal family life for children wouldn't be possible. Time marched on, and our son Matthew grew up. He saw how David and I helped Emily, so after graduating from high school, he demanded that we buy him a place of his own too. There was no escaping it, as in our family, all children had equal rights, and if something was bought for one child, the same had to be given to the others. David took out another loan and bought a 1-bedroom apartment for our middle child. Our youngest daughter, Lily, didn't ask us for an apartment. She simply wanted to go study in England. However difficult the decision was for me, I agreed to let her pursue her studies. We had to sell our car and pay for a year of her university education. After some time had passed since Emily's wedding and their purchase of a house, they started their independent life. Each subsequent return of the children home became rarer, and their concerns for their parents became more superficial. "Mom, Dad, we're planning a vacation abroad," Emily would tell us. "My husband and I have dreamed of visiting Europe for a long time." "I understand, dear, enjoy yourselves." I would smile, but inside I felt empty. Lily also started appearing at home less frequently. She was engrossed in her studies, and her drive for success made her focus on her career. Time flew by quickly. David and I only realized we were on the doorstep of old age when he had a heart attack. That day will be etched in our memories forever. It was a quiet Sunday morning, and David and I decided to take a stroll in the park. The sun gently filtered through the tree leaves, and the air was filled with the scent of flowers. We walked slowly, discussing plans for the future and reminiscing about our best moments together. Suddenly, David stopped in his tracks, clutching his chest. His face turned pale and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. I turned around in alarm, seeing his distress. "What's wrong, dear?" I asked anxiously, supporting him. He could barely respond, gasping for breath. "Chest pain, squeezing, can't breathe." My heart froze with horror. I knew it was serious. David's strength was fading, and he began to slowly sink to the ground. I frantically pulled out my phone from my bag and called emergency services, explaining the situation and asking for help. Minutes felt like an eternity as we waited for the ambulance to arrive. David clung to life, and I stood by his side, holding his hand, not knowing what else to do. When the paramedics finally arrived, they immediately began to administer first aid, then loaded him into the ambulance and headed to the hospital. We spent endless hours at the hospital, waiting for news from the doctors. David was hospitalized and he underwent necessary medical procedures. For me, it was a time of anxiety, worry, and prayer for his recovery. When the doctors finally came out to talk to me, I grabbed their sleeves tremblingly, eager to hear good news. And when they told me that David was stable and his condition was improving, hope sparkled in my eyes. This incident awakened both of us to a healthier lifestyle and the importance of taking care of our health. It also led to a deep understanding of how vulnerable we all are to illness and how important it is to cherish every day spent together. I had to leave my job. At first, I didn't leave my beloved's side. I fed him, washed him, and took him out for walks. After a month, he started to improve, and I breathed a sigh of relief. The most hurtful part is that during Father's illness, not one of our children came to visit him. Emily called a couple of times, complaining she couldn't manage everything: home, work, husband. No matter how many times I called our son, he never picked up the phone. He still hasn't called back to this day, although one of my acquaintances recently told me she saw him at the supermarket with some girl. They were walking around, laughing loudly, with a bottle of alcohol and pineapples, and our youngest daughter simply couldn't leave her studies to come and visit her parents. Our financial situation deteriorated significantly. David's heart attack heralded serious medical problems requiring constant attention and additional expenses. "Darling, I think we'll have to sell the apartment," David confessed, squeezing my hand. "We simply can't afford to maintain it." It was a heavy blow for both of us because our home was not just a place to live, but also a symbol of our family. However, despite the pain, we made the decision in favor of financial stability. Difficulties in relationships with children continue after selling the apartment and moving to a more modest home. We encountered even greater alienation from our children. Calls and visits became very rare, and financial assistance from the children practically ceased altogether. "Mom, Dad, I'm in a tough situation again," Emily would say over the phone. "Can you help me pay for new furniture?" "We've already spent all we could," I replied, feeling helpless. "We're having a hard time ourselves now." With each new request from the children, we felt that they needed us only as a source of financial support, and this was increasingly disappointing. So, in our old age, having 3 children, we ended up alone and unwanted by any of them. Just as we worked and helped them financially, they communicated with us. But now, when we need any support, the children have distanced themselves from us. David and I live together, hoping only for each other. We have no one else. It's upsetting that the children started to distance themselves from us when we faced life and financial difficulties and the need for help from them. Lately, I've been thinking a lot and contemplating that one of the reasons for such an attitude from the children may be their habit of relying on material support from us. Our parenting was based on providing material goods without sufficient attention to developing independence and responsibility in them. Perhaps that's why they perceived us, as parents, as a source of financial assistance, rather than the main support in life.